We're all trying to understand the world around us. We all have our own interpretations of it, and I think one of the darkest musical illustrations of a person's way of seeing the world can be found in Pink Floyd's Animals. After reading George Orwell's satirical fable Animal Farm from 1945, Roger Waters felt inspired to implement the same concept into his lyrics and depicted the human race as a bunch of animals that were slaves to their feelings and instincts. The lyrics are mostly filled with anger, violence, and sadness, but Roger Waters put very little personal context into the themes, leaving many fans wondering where all this darkness was coming from. So where did it come from? Let's find out. From 1968 to 73, Pink Floyd went through a long process where they tried to find their own sound without their earlier frontman, Syd Barrett. Syd disliked the sudden fame that the band was getting, and coupled with his unhealthy drug habit, he slowly started fading away. As the band continued without him, they released a series of albums that were far less successful compared to their debut. But thanks to their label's patience, their hard work, and talent, they eventually gravitated towards the extraordinary. In 73 and 75, they released The Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here, albums that sold tens of millions of copies worldwide and riveted the band to the peak of fame. The Dark Side of the Moon was a journey of collective introspection. Wish You Were Here was a melancholic remembering of their old friend, Syd Barrett. But what made their following album, Animals, so different was that Waters almost wrote the entire album's lyrics by himself. It was a record that was very personal to him, something he had thought about making for a long time, and out of his mind came some very interesting and dark ideas. Now, in 1945, George Orwell released a novel called Animal Farm, and after feeling inspired, Waters created his own version of the concept. George Orwell originally made the novel as a satirical fable that criticized the Soviet Union and Stalinism. The story was written from the perspective of a farm, tying the communistic leaders and their followers up to the roles of the animals living on the farm. Just like Orwell, Waters depicted the people in his lyrics as animals too. But instead of criticizing the Marxist socialist society, he was criticizing capitalism and the British society. He decided to use three different animals in particular: dogs, pigs, and sheep. These are also the names of track number 2, 3, and 4 on the album. Now, the lyrics on Dogs are probably the most striking ones you'll find on the entire album. The first verse describes what sounds like a predator.
Gotta sleep on your toes when you're on the street. You got to be able to pick out the easy meat with your eyes closed.
We later learned that Roger Waters is merely using these animal traits to describe the actions of businessmen and corporate figures that prey on the weak for personal profit.
You have to be trusted by the people that you lie to, so that when they turn their backs on you, you'll get the chance to put the knife in.
The reason why Waters used such strong imagery to describe corporate figures might be because he has been tricked by people in the music industry in the past. People that came off as genuine and trustworthy, but with hidden intentions. Later on, Waters writes about how all the bad blood and trickery bites back on the old dog, or the now retired businessman, as he realizes that the wealth he has built up never gave him a sense of true happiness, and all he's got left is a lonely death.
So have a good drown as you go down all alone, dragged down by the stone.
It's clear that Waters had some pretty fucked up thoughts about the people he had to deal with, but in a way it's easy to understand. People from all corners of the industry wanted a piece of the band after they created The Dark Side, and Waters wanted to understand where this wantingness was coming from. And so we started thinking, and personally I like to believe that Waters saw a bit of himself in those corporate dogs. Of course, he wanted to create music to enrich other people's lives, but he also wanted to be famous. He wanted recognition, because like most other people who grew up in the British capitalistic society, he was one of those who was told if there's one phrase from the album you should remember, it's this one. And I'll tell you why in a minute, alright? Now, Waters has described the lyrics in Animals as less direct compared to what he made on Wish You Were Here, where he more often talked directly in lines of his feelings.
How I wish you were here.
Animals lyrics are more or less a recital of observations, stories of other people.
They're, and more of them anyway, are kind of put into a third person, and about more distant events.
But there are two moments on this album where Waters get very personal, and that's in Pigs of the Wing, which is divided into two parts that bookend the album. According to Waters, it's a love song dedicated to his wife, Lady Caroline Christie, whom he married a year before the release of this album. In the first part of the song, in the beginning of the album, Waters shares a what-if scenario with his wife and the listener. If I didn't care what happened to me, and I didn't care for you, we would zigzag our way through the boredom and pain, occasionally glancing up through the rain, wondering which of the buggers to blame, and watching for pigs on the wing. Waters is essentially telling his wife what life would be like if they hadn't found each other. Life would be a whole lot more painful. They would constantly have their guard up for pigs, referring to these people with bad intentions. But during the second part, at the end of the album, Waters shares light on what their situation actually is like in the present moment. You know that I care what happens to you, and I know that you care for me too.
So I don't feel alone on the way to the stone.
Here, Waters reveals the love between him and his wife. He also mentions that her love makes him less aware of, quote, the weight of the stone, end quote. Remember when I told you that this phrase was very important? Well, as you can see, it appears over again here, and also in track number 4, Sheep. It's a phrase that's repeated several times throughout the album, and because of that, I think it might have something to do with the main theme. I personally think the stone represents the social conditioning, the expectations, and the labor that society puts on us. All these things that keep us from feeling a true sense of freedom. Things that make us feel very small and inadequate. And I think that this feeling of not being enough is what drove Roger Waters and his bandmates to achieve fame in the first place. They just wanted to prove to the world that they were worth something. On another side, I think the carrying of the stone also reflects the burden of knowing that you one day will die and there's no way of escaping it. Now, in the last part of the verse, on Pigs on the Wing Part 2, he also reveals that he sees himself as a dog that needs to escape from the pigs, and that the love from his wife somehow gives him the comfort to not worry about it too much. Now that I've found somewhere safe to bury my bones, and any fool knows a dog needs a home, a shelter from pigs on the wing. He admits that he was told what to do by the man, that he was fitted with collar and chain, and that he tried his best to escape from that reality. He also admits that escaping is impossible, and that the best thing that he could do is to find a home. Eventually, he realized the importance of maintaining his personal relationships with the people he cares about. And although he still might fall victim of the pigs, he can rely on the other people to look after him. And just like this, his gloomy depiction of the world comes to an end after all, and it comes off as a bit more tolerable. The conclusion of this album isn't too optimistic. It serves as a reminder of the dark, capitalistic and inhumane worlds that we live in, but at the same time it sheds some light on the upsides of it. it's clear to see that Waters was on his way down the rabbit hole to face his inner demons though. Things only got darker from this moment onwards, even during their live shows. When the band was playing their last gig on the Animals tour in Montreal, many of the fans were loud and obnoxious. A few people in particular had fired up firecrackers, which was a big distraction for the other audience members and the band. After asking the crowd several times to act respectively in the venue without compliance, Waters got irritated, and sometime during the gig, he spat on an audience member. He wasn't just annoyed by the nature of the audience though. He felt like there was less purpose in doing those shows in general from that moment onwards. Waters was a man who wanted to spread an important message in his lyrics. Look at our society, it's crumbling, we can do better than this. But that message was lost in the grandiose nature of the show, the idol worshipping, and also the business of running the band. But hopefully someone will, and already have picked up on this message in this album, listened to it and actually thought about what Waters wanted to communicate. If you haven't done so yet, I highly suggest you do. Maybe it will help you explore the world through a different pair of eyes, and maybe understand it a little bit better. I want to give a huge thanks to the good people over at Patreon for keeping this channel alive with your continued support. You guys are awesome. If you're looking to have an interesting conversation about rock music, get a behind the scenes look at my channel, or actually collaborate with me on some of my future videos, then make sure you click the first link below and head over to Patreon. Take care guys, bye.